This talk is called "Developers are Rainmakers," and this is actually a quote from my CEO Shlomi Ben Chaim, and he came up with it during our IPO a couple of years ago. It was a successful one, $6 billion, I think. And the interesting part about it that most of the journey that we made in the last 10 years towards this success is built by developers. And I'm not talking about JFrog developers who build the product, and that's obvious, but also by developers in the terms of who our users, customers, and community is. We didn't have any inside sales for the longest time, I think for like 9.5 years of those 10. And all the success that JFrog had was due to developer relations, I might say without any shame, but with great pride. So my name is Baruch Sadogursky, and I actually did the developer relations before I knew it has a name. Employee, but think about number 6 at JFrog, one of the things that we're going to talk about is how developers prefer non-formal everything. So this is my business card. That's my real business card. Chief Sticker Officer. The little bat frog logo is peelable. It is a sticker, and on the bottom you can see my LinkedIn and my Twitter, or whatever, Mastodon, whatever is going on now. If you want to tweet about this talk, feel free to use the hashtag DevRel, and it's also in the bottom of every slide. A little bit of disclaimer. This is one of the charts of from an amazing book called The Culture Map by Irene Myers. If you work with multiple cultures, and you do, just because this is how the world works this way, I strongly recommend this book. It is amazing. On this chart, you can see all the scale from emotionally expressive to unexpressive, and from confrontational to avoid confrontation. I am right here. You cannot find culture which is more aggressively aggressive than two countries that I lived most of my life in. So I apologize for the style if it's necessary. I think it's also will come out in some things that I say. I would like to start this talk with a question of why does a company need developer relation? Any company. You might ask this question. I guess if you're sitting here, you know, but anyway, so why does company need developer relations? I have a couple of examples for you. One is, how do you do marketing? This is a marketing funnel of classic marketing, and most of the companies that don't do DevRel, this is how they do it. So awareness, they will do ads, either online, like banners, pay-per-click, or even physical ads, like, you know, when you see in San Francisco, when you drive to the airport, to the city. Discovery, webinars. For evaluation, it will be emails. Intent, okay, there is an interest, let's do some calls. And then purchase, well, that's a negotiating of contracts, that's calls and emails. And then loyalty, if I have any problem with my product, I will probably open a ticket and get a session with support. Now, this is terrible. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because developers distrust traditional marketing. Developers don't like when you send them emails. Developers use banner elimination software like ad blockers, so they won't see your ads. And generally, this is not how you want your company to be seen by the market, because relations exist regardless if you decide that the company do need developer relations or not. And what I mean by that is, you decide you don't want to do developer relations. You want to do marketing the old style, but developers will hate you. And this is developer relations, just a very poor one. So instead of having poor developer relations, let's have good developer relations. Another thing that we need to remember, that every move that your company does, regardless of the title who does it, whether they're called part of developer relations team or not, everybody in the company impact developer relations. So every SDR that makes a annoying cold call to a developer and like, oh, hello, I'm with this company, do you want to get our free report? It affects developer relations, obviously not in a good way. So not only that your developer relations hurt, not only when you don't do the right thing, but also when you do the wrong thing, whether you do it intentionally or not. So how do we do it right? How do we do the marketing right? So awareness, not pushy. SEO and great technical content. People will search for whatever they care about, and they will find you if you have good technical content. Discovery, same thing, SEO and technical content. Evaluation, give them content that they want to read, watch, listen, whatever. Intent, same thing, give them more deeper technical content so they will figure out they want your product. Purchases, still calls and emails, because it's a negotiation, but also a lot of self-service, right? They need to be able to come and buy it without communicating with salespeople. And then loyalty, not only support sessions, which still relevant for like complicated cases, but first and foremost technical content. Let them find the answers on Stack Overflow, for example, right? And this is where you go like, well, it's just another way of doing marketing, right? Well, yes, but actually no, there is more. And I will give you another example. Another example will be, how do you do product design process? Well, there is 5 steps to product design. It's ask, ideate, plan, create, and assess. That's like classic. What do you do during that? So ask. It's not actually ask, it's guess, because a product doesn't have good access to their potential users. They don't know who to ask. Instead, they ask a little bit around, but it's mostly guesswork. Ideate, once you guessed on what your customers want, you just confirm those guesses and biases by doing brainstorming inside your own product group. So it's not really ideation. And then how do you do assessment? Well, you guess again. Did people like it or not? Well, I don't know, but I think that I heard something that they like, right? So again, you have no idea. The problem is product has a hard time predicting the right features. But again, this is where developer relations can help. How we are doing it right? We ask the developers in the community. Developer relations people, they are in the community. They have the access to ask the right people. Ideate, again, we don't need to brainstorm just within product organization. We can ask people who actually going to use this, how do they want this implemented? And then assess, again, we can ask the developers how they like or don't like it. And there was one more disclaimer that I forgot. Every time I mention developers, it's actually kind of a legacy term that comes from developer relations. Developer relations is actually not only about developers. Developer relations is about engineers, technical people in general. It can be your data engineers, your site reliability engineers, your platform engineers, production engineers, you name it, just ops people, system administrators, whoever. So every time I say developers, I actually mean technical people, engineers in the broader term. So yeah, so product can also benefit greatly from developer relations. What else? How about headhunting? So how headhunting works? Well, attract with ads, convert with LinkedIn messages, engage with emails, track with calls, close with close and emails, and delight with feedback meetings. You probably noticed how familiar it is, this slide, and how similar it is to the sales slide. to the marketing funnel. And of course it is, because in the end of the day, headhunting and marketing, it's exactly the same process. The only difference is that the product are people instead of whatever you're trying to sell. In any way, developers hate cold calls and messages, cold messages. And we do some neat stuff in order to determine those cold call and messages, and actually getting very annoyed when we discover some. So here's a trick that I use. On LinkedIn, my first name is actually an emoji of a top hat. And my last name is Baruch Sadogursky. You know why I did that? This is how I can catch the automatic spammers. So this person, I know for sure, didn't send me a personal message. Instead, they used some automatic software that sends messages to everybody. And it might look very attractive. Hey, Baruch, I'm reaching out to you personally because you are so great. But when they use automatic software and I catch them using the emoji instead of my real first name, I know that it's just a spam message. So they won't get anything from me. So what does it mean? Again, the usual, we need to do it right. How do we do it right? Instead of the cold messages and cold calls, we are doing it with networking. Networking to attract people, networking to do the introduction, networking for engaging, networking for keeping in touch. Closing is probably calls and emails, the onboarding stuff. And then delight is done not by boring meetings with HR, but with true developer relations, which will be inbound towards the employees of your company. What does it mean by that? R&D teams sometimes feel unappreciated, and you know how big of a problem it is. It brings burnout, it brings churn, people are leaving. R&D can feel unappreciated, and that's not a good thing. Developer relations in your organization can empower developers, and not just by talking about it, but actually putting them in the spotlight, in the limelight, if you wish, making them stars of your company. Public speaking, blog posts, highlighting what they are doing. This is what DevRel can help as well. So I guess my point here is that DevRel in your organization can help almost every department. Marketing, of course, product, you saw it, HR, both for hiring and for retention, R&D, helping with the burnout, helping them doing something fun, putting them in a spotlight. Support, yes, the more good content we have out there, the less burden the support folks have, because people know how to use the product better. But also, like something that you say, well, that has nothing to do with it, like sales. How do developer relations help sales? Well, think about it. We spoke about cold calls. If we can help with our networking to make the introduction instead of a cold call, I know for a fact that the conversion from the sales engagement, even for outbound sales, will be better. So everybody can benefit from it. And this is, I hope, when you go like, okay, let's do it. Well, but show me the ROI first. Show me how my investment in developer relations brings me money, and show it to me like a proven tracking links. Well, I have news for you. That was a tricky question that I'm not going to answer, because ROI, when it comes to developer relations, is a trap. This is the title of a talk of one of my friends, Steve Putzi, that delivered the talk that's called ROI is a Trap in one of the developer relations conferences, DevRelConf. If you are interested in it, DevRelCon, sorry, go ahead and Google for it, you'll find it. And he goes in detail why it's a trap. I will give you the short version. ROI is a trap because developer relations activities are very hard to track, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about that. And also, very hard to correlate. So, for example, I will give you an example. Let's say I'm delivering a talk now on a conference. My boss sent me to a conference, paid for me being there, paid for my time and everything else, and I'm delivering a talk in which I might or might not mention directly JFrog products. I might not mention directly JFrog products because people, conference organizers hate when I do a product pitch. So I will talk about the domain, and then I hope that someone in the audience will Google whatever I spoke about, will find that JFrog are the leaders in this area, and maybe even go ahead and do some activity. For example, register for a webinar, or even start open an account on our free tier. How can we correlate this success, this win, to my talk? It's almost impossible. Even worse, what about he doesn't really need it, but he has a friend and she works for a company that does need it, and they are talking about it on like on a Friday night, and she got really excited. She goes ahead and buy it, and it should be attributed to me, but it really can't, because not only we don't know if that comes from my talk, she wasn't even in this conference. So there is no really easy way to do the attribution. And this obsession with ROI on things that cannot really be measured is really just a way of saying, hey, I don't want to do it, but I'm passive aggressive like that. So instead of saying, no, that's a dumb idea, I will tackle you with the question about ROI. Well, if I want to play this game, I can ask, what is the ROI of your latest managerial offsite? How do you measure that? What is the ROI of the President's Club that you give to your salespeople for giving to Bahamas with their family? What's the ROI on that? So both sides can play this game, and obviously that can be nasty very quickly. And I think the reason in those questions that we hear a lot is in this quote, which is the most weaponized quote in the history, if you ask me. And that's Deming, obviously, that said, without data, you're just a person with an opinion. And you know what? If you want to go this route, we can talk about measurement. And the measurement in DevRel exists. It's just for other purposes. Talking about ROI, I can give you its theory, a working theory on how do we measure what developer relations bring to the table. I will ask you where the leads or the sales come from in your company. Unless you do outbound sales, that we are not talking about it right now, because I guess in the first stages of startups, and probably the second and even the third, there is no, you are not building a startup for having executives playing golf with the CEO of your customer. You are doing inbound sales. You are selling to developers. So where the leads and the sales come from? Some come from pay-per-click and the other advertisements. This is fair. Others come from subject SEO. And by subject SEO, I mean, for example, for JFrog, someone Googles artifact repository manager. If JFrog comes on top, they will click on it and go and search, etc. And this is great. This is a proper way to get leads. Now, the interesting part is everything else. Everything else is developer relations. Just because there are no other sources in our known physical universe. If people came to your site naturally, or they Googled JFrog, or they came and convert in any other way, this is thanks to developer relations. Can you always attribute it to a specific activity? No, you can't. Can you attribute it to something else other than developer relations? No, you can't. It came from developer relations. Now, where measurement actually does make sense is measuring different activities, comparing them to each other. For example, you might ask, okay, Baruch, you went to 2 different conferences. You attended KubeCon and you attended KubeCon. Which one was better in terms of developer relations for us to plan for next year? Or we can ask, Baruch, you delivered 2 talks. One was thought leadership, the other was product pitch. Which talk was more beneficial for JFrog? It's again very, very difficult to assess, but those are the measures which actually make sense, as opposite to the ROI question, which doesn't make sense. This is a topic for an entirely different talk that, by the way, I do have, but we won't get into it because otherwise it will take us 3 hours to get out of it. So let's put a pin on it and talk about measurements in other time. For now, yeah, so measure what makes sense. For everything else, you have to have trust and vision, and you have to let your developer relations run, believing that what they do have an impact, especially on the long run. If you don't believe that what developer relations do in the first place, don't get into it. It's not worth it. It will be painful for you, for the team, for everybody around. So speaking about investments in developer relations, where do we invest? It's a good question because there are a lot of aspects of developer relations we can do. We can write documentation. We can write blog posts. We can answer questions on Stack Overflow. We can organize hackathons. We can do video on YouTubes. We can do online talks. We can do in-person talks. There are tons of activities, and generally speaking, it's better to do all of them. Some of them you'll do more, some of them you'll do less. It is natural, and mostly it will depend on the nature of your people. Whoever you are hire, and we're going to talk about hiring in a second, will have a natural inclination. For example, I prefer in-person talks to everything else. This is kind of a radar diagram of my preferences, if you wish. I can do everything else. I prefer in-person talks. There are other people that I know that prefer writing content. And for them, the radar will lean towards blogs much more significantly than I am. So you need to do all of them. You need the right mix of people that will enjoy doing all of them. And the most importantly, reuse content, because in the end of the day, good piece of content will make great blog post, great YouTube video, and a great conference talk. So you can do both. Speaking about content generally and conference talks, here's a tough question that got even tougher during the last couple of years. Should we do online or in person? And that goes back to both conference talks, online or in person, and other activities. Should I go to this conference, or should I do a blog post instead, or maybe YouTube video instead? There are obvious benefits for online. Broader reach is one of them. But on the other side, the engagement of offline is measurably considerably and very importantly less than in person. There is nothing like speaking with people in person. Online is measurable, or should I say a little bit more measurable than in person. It's still not measurable enough to justify doing online only, but it's marginally better. In person, we build better relationship. When I speak in a conference and I meet people after my talk and I have a drink or a bite with them, the bond is on completely different level than the the avatars that I see now or on my screen with you. So I bet you are wonderful people. I would love to meet you all and be friends with you. It's not going to happen after this, unfortunately, unless we take our relationship further and maybe speak one-to-one, etc. Another benefit of online, no travel, and it means less burnout for people who are traveling, and obviously less time spent on planes, and better for the environment, and of course cheaper. From the other side, the benefits of in-person is much greater feedback. And you remember how important feedback is, especially for the product. I can ask 20 times in an online conference, give me feedback about our product. I won't hear from anyone back. But if we talk in person and I ask you, hey, you use our factory? Yes, I do. What do you think about it? I will get an answer. It might be just polite answer. It might be a honest feedback, but at least I will hear back from people. Online, I won't. So there are pros and cons, and I guess by now we know that we need to do both. Let's talk about the team, and I already mentioned that we're going to it is important. And what are the roles in general? Who are your DevRel people? So there are a lot. I think if you need to hire first developer relations person, it will be your developer advocate or technical evangelist. This is a person who can be a one-man show in organizing developer relations and running most of it inside your organization. Remember, as I told you, everybody in the organization impacts developer relations. So it's not that now your developer advocate will do all the work and everybody else can forget about developer relations. No, but developer advocate will focus developer relations in the entire organization. So for example, when they need a blog post, and they think that there is an engineer who is qualified to provide content for this blog post, the impact will be done by this engineer, either by writing blog post or by being interviewed by the developer advocate who will create the content. But the real impact will come from R&D in this case, this particular case. But the developer advocate will be the one who will organize this activity and then publish the blog post, promote it, etc. So this is the first hire. And there are competing titles: developer advocate, technology evangelists. Titles are important. Technology evangelist was the original title of this job. It came back from the late 70s, early 80s, Microsoft, and what they believe they need to do is evangelize. Tell everybody how their product is amazing and how everything can be done with their product. Now, it works to an extent, but developers, as on top of they hate the cold calls and the cold messages, they also don't like being evangelized too. It's also less beneficial for our organization. We actually want a conversation. Remember, we want the feedback. So developer advocate is a much better name that Google came with in early, well, mid 2000s to highlight how important the advocacy part of developer relations is, how it is important to advocate for the engineers inside your organization, and how it is important to advocate for the engineers of your organizations and their work outside of your organization. So advocacy, developer advocacy, is a much richer process than just preaching to the crowd. And this is why developer advocate is really a better term. Next, your next hire should be community builder. It's sometimes called community manager. Again, titles matter. You cannot manage a community. It's not yours to manage. You can try and make it stronger by actively participating in it. This is why community builder is a better name. And community builder does community relations. They interact with the community. They find opportunities for the developer advocate to communicate with the community, and sometimes they run advocacy programs like champions programs, this kind of stuff. So this is like more community builder stuff. Third hire, events manager, and events manager is also a marketing role, right? Because there are events, marketing events, when you have a booth and you scan the badges and everything else. So maybe marketing already has this role, or maybe the DevRel team will be the first one to have a community and events manager, and then they share responsibility. DevRel event manager will naturally lean towards meetups and community conferences more, but also helping with speaking engagements in commercial conferences as well. UX expert. This is the person that will communicate with the product team, get the feedback, ideate, assess, from the developer relations perspective, right? Obviously, everybody else do it as well. Developer advocates and community builders that hear from other people, but UX expert can really help facilitate this communication. Technical writer. Again, this is a role that product might own, but sometimes, and it makes a lot of sense, this role sits in developer relations because the documentation that we write is for developers. So developer relations know better how to build better communication. And also in larger teams, developer relations team might have a developer relations engineer that is in charge of creating content like demos, integrations, and this kind of stuff. Developer relations manager, when the team is big enough, obviously makes sense. What you need to remember about developer relations manager is that developer relations work is very diverse, and micromanaging developer relations team doesn't work. Micromanaging generally doesn't work, but it might work on like a very planned and very routine jobs. For developer relations, it doesn't work for sure. So the only thing that DevRel manager can help is remove the obstacles and let the team run. Hiring developer advocates specifically is very, very hard because developer advocates are weird creatures, rare species. They are technical from one side because they are engineers, have to be, but they also like people. This combo is very, very rare. On top of that, they don't consider marketing to be profanity because obviously a lot of what we do is using smart marketing, developer marketing to get to the market. And if the engineer just say, yeah, no, I'm not going to do anything that promotes the product, they're probably not a good fit for developer engineers. And this brings us to a very hard question. How do we find those people? You can go and try and hire someone with already established reputation for being a good developer advocate. Hiring rock stars, if you wish. It has pros and cons. So pros, they have already established brand. If you say something like, hey, Kelsey Hightower joined my company, it's obviously great. On the other side, their brand, this brand is their brand. It's not necessarily easily tied to the brand of your company. They obviously have a lot of experience and know what they are doing. On the other side, developer advocates burn really, really fast, just because this job has tons of emotional toil, and emotional toil brings the burnout. When you are flying around, being on stage, speaking to people all the time, it is exhausting. Developer advocates burn very, very fast. So you need to remember that when you hire someone who left their previous company because they was exhausted over there, and they are excited about joining a new company, but how long this excitement will last. Networking, it's the same. They have huge network and huge followings, but it's their network. Probably when they will leave you, they will take it with them. On the other side, you might think about raising a rock star. And that will be like my career. I started as a Java developer, a senior developer, and then architect and consultant, and then I learned how to do developer relations. I wanted to learn it. I was excited about it. Obviously, as I mentioned, I didn't even have an idea the whole field has a name. I had to Google what I'm going to do in order to find that, hey, my job title should be a developer advocate. I was that clueless. Another benefit of raising them is that they know the product. I came from R&D. I knew the product inside out. That was a huge benefit from me when it came to creating content. I did require mentoring when it came to developer relations, but product I knew inside out. And technical skills, obviously, it was much easier for me creating content that speaks to developers because I came from this area. The biggest benefit, the biggest obstacle in raising a rockstar is that you pull someone very, very good from other team. You pull them from your R&D, from your support, from your field engineering, and this is painful. And this is a trade-off that needs to be thinking of. But in the end of the day, I feel that it's really, really worth it. Another benefit that hiring a rockstar is more important, is more expensive. Taking an engineer is actually cheaper because you retain the salary that they used to have as an engineer. You add on top of that the addition of them doing something more than being an engineer, and it still will be, sorry, but it still will be cheaper than hiring a rock star in the market. So I mentioned that developer relations people, and especially the developer advocates, do tons of stuff, like a lot of stuff. What it is, so first of all, not every day is the same. It cannot be a day in the life of developer advocate because days are very different. In some days, we think about ideas for content, ideas for talks, for blogs. Not only think, but also actively engaging with the rest of the organization, hunting for those ideas. We asking R&D, what are they doing now? We asking product, what are the most exciting features that are now in the work? We ask the community what they want to hear about, or we try to assess what is the pain that we need to address when we advocate for the developers. Next.
Baruch, yeah. Can I ask a quick question here?
Sure, absolutely. Go ahead.
Because I think it's relevant to what you're talking about right now. You know, a lot of the teams that are here are very early in their journey. So say like the early team that's put together, anywhere from 5 to 10, mostly engineers that are working on the product, and they're now thinking about, well, how do we do DevRel well? And so, maybe they hire somebody, right? But maybe also it's people like like yourself when you were in the org, in the engineering org, like going and writing blog posts and doing stuff. And so like I guess given that framework, like what are the tactics and things that early teams should be thinking about in terms of doing DevRel efforts when you're trying to also find product market fit? You're trying to do all these different things. You have the team, like, should you assign one person to do it? Should all of you be writing blog posts? Is blog post the only thing that means? Like, what does that actually mean for those early teams? I think would be helpful.
This is an excellent question. Excellent question. So there are two ways you can look at it. You can say, okay, you know what? For now, I don't have a person who manages developer relations activities in my organization, just because maybe it's too early. Maybe we manage without them. Then it's always everybody's job, right? To do developer relations. But if you don't have this person who manages those activities, it's also everybody's responsibility. So maybe the leadership team, the SEO, the CTO will find the time to urge the team doing all kind of developer relations activities. And they might say, you know what, you write a blog post, you record a YouTube video, you apply to this conference talk. And then people might do it reluctantly or not, or eagerly, doesn't matter, but they will do it. The problem with this approach is that SEO, CTO, the leadership, and everybody in the organization, especially in the early stage, have their hands full, like more than full. Everybody are working their asses to do their job. And not necessarily this distraction, hey, write a blog post, will be a welcome distraction that people will accept or as their part of their work and do it properly on time, etc., etc. One of the benefits of having developer advocate very, very early in the stage, like as I mentioned, I'm 6 and it should be like, it might be 4th, it might be 5th, is that now you have someone who can actually orchestrate it and help with that. Yes, not all of my ideas should be mine. I'm not signed on each and every piece of content, but it's my job as a developer advocate to find the person who will give me this content. Maybe I will interview them. Maybe they want to write it and I will support them. Maybe they will just say, you know what, go ask someone else and name the person that has the information. But in the end of the day, it's my responsibility to make sure that this piece of content exists, whether I do it or someone else.
Got it. And that makes a lot of sense. And one question, just in those early days, like, is there certain types of content or certain types of DevRel activities that you would recommend more than others? Like, are blog posts better than a I'm making it up, but like a YouTube tutorial, or a Twitter video where you walk through how you integrate with a different product? I mean, obviously there's so many different things, so I know it's kind of a loaded question, right? But like, just kind of what sort of specific tactics early on do you think are more helpful than others?
So I will tell you this, there are techniques which are completely inappropriate. Like, I don't know, you know what, nowadays it's even hard to give an example what not to do because everything works. But doing a dancing TikTok video, probably not the first thing that comes to mind when you think about promoting your product. But you know what, everything else works. Developers love they love YouTube videos. If the blog post is engaging, is amazing. They find a lot of content on Stack Overflow. They follow you on Twitter. There are almost no bad content. The real question in selecting on where to invest is, what are you capable of doing in the best way possible? Will your YouTube video be with horrible sound, horrible lighting, some person who is hard to understand sitting in their bedroom with a pile of dirty clothes in the background? Or they will write an absolutely awesome blog post in perfect English, help with Grammarly, or maybe other people are reviewing it? You pick what works best. So based on the people that you have on hand, their inclinations and their capabilities, you can select what will be better content to go with on those early stages. And when you grow your developer relations team, you will look for people who complement the people that you already have. So if you have someone like me in the early days, all I want to do is in-person talks on conferences. Put me on a plane 200 days a year, and you make me to go to conferences, you make me very happy person. Someone else, like, for example, my dear friend Anton Arkhipov, who is a developer advocate in JetBrains, hates traveling to conferences. Instead, he does tons of amazing online content. So if you have both of us, you actually covered most of the possible content creation with two people which are very diverse.
Got it. That answers my question. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So we were here and talking about exactly about a content creation and how it works. So yeah, so Ideate, as I mentioned, developer advocate, don't just sit there in the dark and then boom, I have a great idea for content. No, it's a process of speaking with everybody, the community, the engineers, the product, the leadership. You know what? I can go and ask my CEO, hey, Shlomi, what do you think will be a good topic to concentrate for the next quarter? What are the most important topics that you want me to engage with the community, right? And then content creation. Content creation is a long process that most of it done behind the scenes. So if you come to your developer advocate, hey, what have you done like in the last 2 weeks? Well, I worked on the content for my next talk. Okay, show me. There is nothing to show. It's all here. It's maybe in the notes. It's maybe like vague ideas, but it is still very hard work. Deliver content, obviously, write blog posts, record YouTube videos, record this TikTok dance, go to a conference and deliver it. Collect feedback. You cannot do the first without the second. As we spoke, not an evangelist and developer advocate. When you are in the conference, you speak with people. When you are doing content which is online, ask for feedback, reply in content, engage with people, and then deliver this feedback back to your organization. Travel reports, speaking with product, speaking with R&D, providing this feedback, sitting with your SEO and telling them, hey, Shlomi, this is what I heard. We need to do such and such. We need to fix such and such, all this kind of stuff. Now here, what another quote that, you know what, this is the quote I personally hate the most. The plural of anecdote is not data. I heard it once from a product manager and I almost slapped him in the face, because this is actually exactly the opposite of what Raymond Wolfinger said. Now, I heard this quote a lot, and I went to do some research to try to understand what the hell is this terrible quote, who came up with it, and who I need to kill. Turns out that it is the quote that contributed to someone called Ray Wolfinger. Ray Wolfinger was a political, or I think still is, I think he's alive, political science professor. And I'm like, okay, this is not right. This is not something that a political science professor can say, because all the data that political science professor has is anecdotes. How the political science know anything? They speak with people. It can be polls, it can be interviews. This is exactly anecdotes. You want to hear something funny? Raymond Wolfinger said exactly the opposite. He said the plural of anecdote is data, because data comes from bits of information, and in some areas, for example, community or politics, this information comes from talking to people. So the plural of anecdote is data, and the information that your developer advocates and developer people bring to you is the most valuable thing you can have. Right? Diminishing it with the stupid idea that somehow it's not relevant because it's not data is a grave mistake. Then you're back to guesses. And now something that I want to finish with, if I sold you on the idea that you need developer relations, you might ask a bigger question. If I want to build my company and my product on developer relations, how do I build my product to better serve developer relations? And here comes the 3-step product model for developer relations that Ellen mentioned in the beginning. So how can we position our product to work for developers? The first part will be an exciter. An exciter is the version of your product that is intended for personal use, that is free for use, and that has the technology that is exciting for developers. For example, I will give you an example of GitHub. For people. I can sign up. It's free for me. I can use it in my personal development. I can get PRs from users. I can manage a website. I can manage Q&A. It's amazing. I am going to use it. Next level is team collaboration. Team collaboration version of your product is intended for a team of users. It can be bought by the team on the team's budget, something that flies below the radar of the larger organization in terms of budget. And it is self-service. There is no need to speak with salespeople, and it promotes collaboration. That will be your GitHub organizations. Now, my team leader sees that I'm using GitHub and all my colleagues use GitHub, and she's like, okay, let's use GitHub together. Okay, there is some, I don't know, maybe $100 a month, maybe it's per head, like $20 per head for a team, maybe it's a couple of thousands a year subscription, and then we can use GitHub together, and it works better because we are in the same organization, and it provides additional features. This is how your product profiliates within the organization. Now, once this happens, this is where the company, the organization, the corporate notice, hey, what's going on? Everybody in my organization use this product and it's a mess. Everybody have their own accounts. It's not under our control. It doesn't have our enterprise single sign-on. We don't know if it's compliant. They speak to you, and this is where you ask for the big money. You say, okay, now getting all those grassroots licenses and all those collaboration teams under the big compliance umbrella of your organization will cost you 6 figures. The good news here, they don't have a choice. They cannot go away from buying your product because the product is already there. It's in each and every team in their organization. And saying, you know what, we figured out you use GitHub, you cannot use it anymore, is not an option. People will leave. Instead, they have to go and buy whatever enterprise subscription in order to get it under their control for security, compliance, and other means. So this is my idea of three-step product model for developer relations, and it brings a follow-up questions of, can this first stage, the Exciter, or should the first be open source? And it sounds like it's a great idea that the Exciter will be open source because it implies that it's free, that it's for personal use. You might want to get contributions from the community that will help you make it better. This is how you get this feedback of importance of which I speak constantly. So it sounds like a great idea. Our open source is going to be awesome. But on the other side, we know companies that get completely cannibalized by their open source. Because the open source is so open, everybody can contribute. There are examples where no one wanted to buy the commercial tiers, the team and the enterprise, because every request can be answered by just participating in open source. So this is an interesting trade-off that you really need to think about, of how your open source can be open, can be awesome, can be exciting, but also will leave space for your commercial offering to upsell, to coexist, to improve it. And here in the crowd, there are companies that do it very successfully, and I'm looking on your avatar, Sergey, now, but there are many others, and it's an interesting trade-off to pay attention to. With that, thank you very much. We have a couple of minutes for questions. You can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Twitter for whatever it lasts, probably until the end of this week, when it crashes and burns to the ground, and everywhere else. And if you have any questions now, go ahead.
Hi, Baruch. This is Natalie, and I have a quick question. And it's kind of a follow-up to what Shomik was asking you, and you were talking about the different pieces of content, what works, etc. So I'm curious, because you've been in this field for so long, what's something that you would never do again when building DevRel? And then I would say on the flip side, what is something like in terms of activities, in terms of content, et cetera, that you found a lot of success with that you'd recommend like doubling down on going forward?
I love those questions, both of them. Thank you.
Right.
So the first one, I immediately start smiling because I try to reflect on my career and looking back, what did I do wrong? And I think I nailed it eventually. It took a lot of maturity to understand. I've always been excited about the tech that I was working in, because this is something obviously taken for granted. I wouldn't be in the same company and in the same industry for so long if I wasn't excited. And I really and truly believe, and I still believe that what we do in JFrog, both on the dependency management side and the DevSecOps side, is really the best thing after sliced bread. I think that it's amazing. And I was trying to convey this to everybody, whether they ask me or not, right? I was just like, hey, this is so good, you have to try it. Many years after, I realized my grave mistake, that I was being too pushy about my technology. And my excitement, although was genuine, was perceived as fake, cheap marketing by a lot of people. And people don't want to learn on other people's mistakes. They want to try and error. So when I say to people, hey, you need to use Artifactory to solve this problem, they will be like, stop pushing your product. I don't have this problem. And you know what? They do have it. It will bite them in the ass, and they will recall our conversation, but they might not take Artifactory even there, just because I was too pushy. Instead, be gentle, present the problem, say, did you have a solution? Let them remember this solution when they stumble on this program without being overly eager, overly excited, over pushy. It took me years to understand. Also, the cultural thing that I mentioned earlier, be aware of the voice that come across, especially in different cultures. Me being Israeli, born in Soviet Russia, very pushy, very excitable, very aggressive, not working well in tons of communities and tons of cultures, right? So that's another very important thing to be aware of. Now, in terms for what works great, I am a huge believer in speaking in meetups. If you look from the breadth of engagement, you can say, you know what, like, but the breadth of reach, you can say, you know what, this is just stupid. You fly across the country to speak with 50 people instead of recording the YouTube video that will reach potentially hundreds, thousands, or millions. The meetup doesn't make any sense. But what for me, the differentiator is not how many people you reach, but how deep the engagement is. Seeing my video popping up in ads and then watching 10 seconds of it and then like, this is boring, and then checking my emails while doing that, comparing to coming to an event to hear from Baruch, who is the main dish, who is the main rock star of this event, sitting, looking at him from the bottom up on the stage. This is impactful stuff. I make an effort to come to this meetup. I want to hear from this person. Whatever they say will be heard. Another benefit of Meet, and this is even much more impactful than a conference talk, even in a huge conference. Unless you get like a keynote in KubeCon, just another talk in a tiny room in KubeCon with 50 people out of 10,000, and you are just one of hundreds of speakers, well, they might come in here, maybe they will live in the middle, maybe they're not excited. In Meetup, you are the main dish. They come to hear from you. This is very, very impactful. Meetups are more eager to find speakers than conferences. It's easier to get accepted. And they will help you with the content because they are invested in your particular talk to being very successful, because you are the only talk, or maybe like one of two or three. You are the main dish. So I can talk all day about how awesome meetups are. There are ways of optimizing on travel and time. Roadshows are great. I've just been to one. I've been in, I think, like 10 meetups in 2 weeks and got weekend at home, which was nice. So there are ways to do that, and it's definitely worth it.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's insane that you did 10 in the last 2 weeks, but amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much, Baruch, for joining us today. This has been great. I think everyone's had enough time to note down the contact info on the slide. But if for any reason you didn't, I'm also happy to make intros directly.
Right.
We've recorded this to share.
People, feel free to reach to me if you have any follow-up questions about developer relations. You want to talk with me, you want to connect, let's talk. I'm all for helping everybody getting this thing right, because it's good to you, it's good for me, it's good for the industry. There are no losers when you do developer relations. Talk to me and we'll make it happen.
Okay.
Thanks
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Thank
Baruch.
you so much.
Thanks, Will.